a hybrid, something that focuses on open space but is better planned.
But if we can accomplish the same things that a planned development would and follow the ORSD track, I think.
A planned OSRD.
Yeah, planned OSRD, but take out planned.
Make an OSRD a bad thing, don't do that.
OSRD that's purely residential, nothing possible.
There's also an M, and there was also an IP, which seemed to allow, there's like one in Brentwood, Tennessee, I was trying to read about it, but it was kind of similar in where it allowed for different types, different strategies were used to add diversification, and then you have the OSRDM, which allowed mixed use.
Can you do multiple OSRDs on a property?
No, you're just talking about planning, doing something that's planned throughout, over, yeah, and there may be one type here and another type there, depending on the science of the land, the surrounding land uses. Oh, that's the other thing. Can I offer?
But you have to zone a parcel, right?
To include in your comments about density, to consider the surrounding land uses, surrounding density.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Pass the cookies. Innovative project. It was real interesting. How was it?
Innovative.
3 or 4 for you?
This is 2.
Who's looking out for me?
So Bill, based on what I said though, I really feel, and we have a couple of we have a few council folks here right now, that if we continue to push planned development as the guiding light, there's either A, going to have to be a big education on why planned development is good and would help this community out.
I think that ship sailed. If you
So
want my,
I'm
if you want
looking
my,
at, there's two strategies here. There's
elected
A,
official hat.
if we keep using planned development in all of these,
Let's just call it something else.
that's where I was going with ORSD, because that is in the comprehensive plan. We can go back and point to it, but I'm really afraid that the ORSD is not going to have the teeth that the community wants when it comes to zoning.
I think one thing that you have to do to get more acceptability of higher concentrations is to limit it to a certain area, a known area where people are aware of that.
A land use plan?
Absolutely.
Hey, does that mean like a land use plan?
Well, I mean, you could almost do it here by saying, within so many, a mile and a half of this radius of this here could be. That's the only way it's going to be accepted, because people are afraid it's going to be in their backyard, and there's too many NIMBYs around, and I understand that. We're all that way.
Well, you're right, though. This whole plan development's just got a horrible name.
Coming from someone who doesn't like the name plan development, I don't think that we should change the name. But here's the thing though, it's like a unicorn. Nobody knows what it is, so we need to define it.
Well, there are a lot of
We
people
talk
that
about how
define
great it is, but we have no definition for it. So how can we say it's great when we don't even know what it is?
Well, so how could so many people say how bad it was if they didn't know what
That's
it was?
just it, because there's nothing, there's no limits on it. Everything else is defined. There's open space, defined everywhere else. There's all, parameters on every other
Let me
district.
tell you what, I received enough emails about planned development and apartment complexes that would be built. Now, I know that science won't support any of that, but that doesn't matter. People are afraid of it, and they already have that notion. I said this months ago, that if the term PD was an impediment to the work, then it should just go away and develop something, don't even name it, that has, that meets the complex and has the limits that you folks all agree, or can agree, at least in the majority, that have the limits that people would accept. I think that's where we have to get, right?
And it has to have a name so that they can say what they
Yeah.
want to do.
But
They want.
We can call it Jason Webster's development rate.
Yeah.
Put mine in.
So
I'll just shave my hair.
I think, I'm sorry, I think there's a so back
Let's have one conversation.
Let me get, Deborah?
When Carrie added, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but Carrie, when you add, let's look at what's all around it as far as zoning is concerned. If we create something that allows for different density within the same, does that prohibit or make it harder?
No, it would allow it to feather, you don't have to have the same density throughout a development.
Okay, that was,
The overall density is set, but there are parts of it, there are 5-acre lots and quarter-acre lots within the same development, and the 5-acre lots are located near the other existing 5-acre lots.
gotcha, okay, just wanted to.
I think going back to that land use and also what Dick was actually saying about people being scared where it may just pop up, if we had some kind of plan where it showed where everything was going to be, and then maybe you could even bring in public water and sewer to a specific location to serve that land use that's going to be proposed around, say, around a 220 that has more larger capacity roads with signals and that kind of thing. So if you were going to build higher density developments, you put them in more, higher capacity areas. And then if you did that, then that would also, people could look at that and say, well, then I'm not going to be worried about PD because it's not necessarily around me. And then it would kind of contract it down to not being so just could pop up anywhere. And then you could kind of focus your development and develop from a core, so to speak.
Yeah, and Bob just brought up, he said a comment to me a minute ago that made a lot of sense, is the PD that was talked about before was a text amendment. It's not the PD that's in here. But we, as a committee, have still been beaten up over the PD that's in here that's extremely vague, and that's why everyone's scared of it, because it's vague.
It's almost
But
the same.
it's so vague.
Very
So
similar.
how do we say,
No,
let's
it's not.
define this thing? Yeah, I
It's
think they were
way more
dramatically
vague.
different.
Way more vague. It doesn't even have, it's not even
Yours is more-
associated,
the
no,
new
this
one?
one.
In the draft.
The one in here right
It's
now.
it's not even tied to.
But so the PD just has a bad connotation to it. How do we turn that around, or how do we do something that the public is gonna like the direction that we've gone as a committee and made recommendations?
PDs are kind of vague anyway, though. It's kind of, they're going to come in and it's a planned development based off of what kind of zoning restrictions they want to put on that particular property. And so you can't really say it's going to be one recipe necessarily. It'll be vague, and I think maybe the vagueness of it would be easier if you didn't necessarily define the word, but define the space where it may be used. Because if it was going to be around areas where you knew could have walkability with sidewalks and networks and closer to grocery stores where people can get to and maybe not drive so much, and also on larger roads, I mean, then someone could go in there and assign whatever kind of zoning restrictions they want to it. I mean, that's kind of planned development. They come in and they list out their things and
I think
evaluate
Ryan
from
makes a
there.
good point on that. I mean, I think most people are opposed to new development. When they hear that, they get all worked up. And if you have designated areas like we're talking about, designated locations defined or within that, I think that is a lot more sellable than just leaving it open.
It
That's
still
the
has
word.
to adhere to all of the characteristics that we called out in the comp plan.
Right.
And so specific locations and some form of a ceiling on.
So we had 100 acre, we had 100 acre, that,
75.
100 acre lots, but there were 12 or 14.
Yeah, 14, I think it was 75 minimum.
75 was minimal.
Originally was 40.
75.
It was 75.
Originally 40.
So are we, I added some, I don't know if I like encourage inclusion or housing and value various
So no one came up with the silver bullet answer.
I put quotes around planned development, type zoning, describe this district,
So can I say one
identify
thing?
and describe a district.
What I would say, Summerfield's unique, right? It's a unique community.
For now.
Make a unique district, right? So unique, you just don't name it, just talk about its attributes.
Well, I was leaning towards what Andrew was saying with the OSRD designation that's in the comp plan. It seems to achieve similar goals. The one thing that I seem to be leaning towards the PD style, if I understand correctly, Carrie, is that there's more early preview in the PD structure before the rezoning, and so there's more control at the earlier levels and more visual, right? The community can see what to expect before the rezoning is allowed. That's an attractive thing to me, as opposed to, I think, how OSRD works is it's sort of a blanket request for rezoning, and then after, then we get to see it, right?
But we can define what it is. We can take that same concept so people can see a little bit more. We can require
We can
developers.
define what an OSRD is for us.
Exactly, they can have them come in beforehand, be more specific, site plan, say this is what we're going and this is what we're thinking about doing. So it doesn't have to be that open-ended. We can define any of this stuff.
Other amenities.
So like the
Just to fit,
OSRD,
as John
Or
said,
the
where you need to do it that way.
OSRD
The
IP.
trick is to work the flexibility into it so that it can respond to a market.
I'm leaning in that direction.
Yeah, but if you make it too flexible, then it's a PD. And that's what people don't
No,
like.
okay,
Well,
no,
then
we're not
define
we're not
what-
making it too flexible, where it's going to be regulated, but it has to, in my opinion, it should have some flex
Yeah.
to meet market demands.
Absolutely.
But within Summerfield, we're not an urban, our vision is not one of an urban.
It's not
Right.
Right, and that's why we gotta make sure we define it that way, because we wanna make sure it's not that. Because that's the problem with CD before, why people didn't like it. It was too open-ended. You didn't know which you were gonna get. And you could put it anywhere you wanted to in Summerfield. That's
You had
the big.
75 acres or
Or
more.
if you had 75, and
Or
there's
if
a
you had
lot of
600
people
acres or
with
400
75
acres.
acres and more. And that's not taking into account
So
free
if-
property
So if
owners
we
to
make
get
an,
together.
if we make an OSRD and then we make it that restrictive, then we can't have an OSRD like we just put in on Strawberry Road.
Well, make another, make another.
Not
So,
necessarily, depending on what.
keep the OSRD, that is the way it is, or similar to that, and make another one.
I'm telling you.
Do you want
It's the IP.
I'm telling you,
So,
it has a lot of similar
Hey,
characteristics.
so doesn't
Does it
this
say what it's-
OSRD,
Innovative.
hey Carrie,
Innovative plan.
Carrie,
Could we
the
go back to
OSRD
here?
in the comp plan, what it talks about after affordable housing strategy 1 and 2, is that not the flexibility you're talking about, where you have 50-acre tract and you can do X number of acres being used for high-end, X number of acres for townhomes? I mean, it seems like it gives some flexibility, 37 single-family house versus 18 duplexes.
more flexibility in housing types? Because the word, and a housing type being a 4-pack. What is wrong with a house that looks like a very large, single-family residential and has 4 apartments in it?
But where does it say
Seriously,
that
Yeah,
in
there is
the
nothing.
is that wrong?
comp plan?
Is that not in our vision? Because it doesn't have to be, I'm just saying, is that something that doesn't fit our rural vision?
I think it's about how you develop the land, how you make it look. I mean, it can absolutely fit the vision. I don't understand why it couldn't.
What do you think, Todd?
Well, again, I think it goes back to how we define it, because you can't just assume they're gonna make it look a rural
Envision what you
division.
want to end up with and whether that would,
And that'll work as long as you keep the overall density low. It's still about
Right.
density. We've limited amount of resources out here. You know, our schools are only
science
so
of the
big.
land.
Well,
and
how do you
let's-
define density being low? You've got to improve on that
Well,
density
science.
to allow some of this.
Science.
The current density will not allow you to do what we're talking about.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if well and septic will, anyway.
No, that's not true. Current density will, if we give it the flexibility like Carrie's talking about, it's gonna let you build other housing types with smaller lot sizes, but the overall density still stays the same.
What is
Because you're just
what-
increasing the open space around it to help keep that rural
And
feel.
that's what Marlene said the last week. I mean,
Well, that's not exactly what Marlene said. Marlene works for the building industry and she's gonna promote building, so you gotta take what she says with a grain of salt. I've
I
worked with her
totally
for 20
disagree
years.
with that.
Well, I've worked with her on committees and I know how this works.
I knew she would
Everything
go
she
straight.
said.
Could
I mean.
But she's also saying, we don't have to behave like everybody else does on the country, because as John
Well, we're
says,
definitely
where
not.
you need,
Yeah, we're definitely not.
and that's a good thing, that's why we're one of the top communities in North Carolina for quality of housing and schools.
And you know what, and we're 92% or 91% white, and we are not doing a good job at all about being inclusive. That's embarrassing to me, to be
I
quite honest
totally
about
agree,
it.
totally agree.
Well,
We are
you
an
know-
elitist community, and we have got to start thinking about providing other types of housing for people to be a little bit more inclusive.
Well, just
Totally
because you
agree.
change the affordability or the price range of housing type, doesn't mean you're gonna bring in diversified people. That's not gonna automatically change it, and that's kind of what you're saying. I don't control what people come in and move out into Summerfield, and that's kind of, I don't understand you're saying we're
So
that
let
much
me
white.
explain it to you.
I don't control that.
No, you don't, but when we have an ordinance that doesn't allow for flexibility in housing, we also create an environment that doesn't, whether you're white, black, green, yellow, or blue, it doesn't allow people, $75,000 is considered high income in this country. When you look at what the income of our community is, you're excluding people. So when you say,
And that's not
hold
excluding
on,
people,
hold on.
people choose to live here or
You know
not.
what? But when you say, Todd,
You're excluding
income.
teachers, you're
Income.
excluding
which is
teachers,
excluding people.
and you're excluding, firemen, policemen.
Yep. And I remember
Yeah.
going to a public hearing in this community when somebody stood up at the platform and said, you know what? Maybe the teachers need to save more money before they get here. You know, not everybody is meant to live in Summerfield. That's a quote. I remember it like it was yesterday.
Well, I don't make those kind of quotes, and you know what? There's plenty of houses that are affordable being sold in Summerfield. They may not all be
Can
brand
you show
new.
where they are, show me where they are, because I sure.
Yeah, well, you
Could I
know,
return the focus back to the recommendations? I think
I'd like to buy one of them, because I'm gonna be in.
we could be here much longer than tonight.
Yeah, but you know, I do have to hit back to, you know, I knew she was gonna get discredited. I just knew that was gonna happen, that's why I wanted her to talk about her credibility.
Yep.
We're not saying what she said is the Bible, right? We're saying she gave us some input to this, and that's what when we go forward with these recommendations, we need definition and to take out a lot of the vague part of whatever we do for zoning, right? And she helped give us a little bit of a guiding light, but she also said, let's make sure there's science behind it. I think we're all concerned about the 20-year-old water study and that it was for all of Guilford County. I think we're all concerned that the guy who taught the two guys who did that water study discredited it. That was kind of new information on my end. I think she gave us some trend information on what's happening with well and septic around the country. But we need science for us on this new water study to show us how we can align it with how we zone.
Where's the paper that discredits this study?
Yeah, is
Where is there somebody that officially published that this is a rotten study?
I'm
But
just
where
going
is
by
that?
what she
Well,
said.
and actually, because that I have it, it's stated now, so we are looking for the current water feasibility study
When is that gonna
to
come
make,
out?
well, the study itself is somewhat delayed because we're waiting for technical engineering information. But I've asked for a presentation of the report that reports on the report.
So I'm just saying, when we put all this together, I think we all can agree that we want more teeth in whatever we do, right? And so let's align that. And we do have a comprehensive plan that does talk about variety of housing types, does talk about variety of density, still keeping the open space requirements.
Well, it does define it, I guess, and again, where does that come into?
Is that the zoning?
Density in these areas where we're gonna allow some of this other product type in.
If
I'm
we
just
do-
trying to understand that.
If we do a land use plan, it would be a public input-based process. That asked a series of questions to say what is the land, and I've actually started doing that. I've asked the comp plan to tell me where it thinks these different things should be. And I'm starting to produce a sort of land use plan.
So Bob just mentioned that the town has adopted a density. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
The town has adopted a density requirement.
As of now, we have.
Okay. Does that align with the comp plan?
It's in the comp plan.
No. And actually, the comp plan itself talks about, in the water and sewer aspects, it talks about how density was determined based on a water and sewer report, but that what we're better off focusing on recharge
Right.
and technologies, and two different types of technologies, right? On cluster systems and on-site systems.
I think
Which is the science of.
John's comment and recommendation is spot on in terms of needing an OSRD and another overlay or zoning district, because in the first place, I think it's going to be important for developers to have a target that isn't constantly moving also be able to look at a particular property and say, I can develop an OSRD and I can put a plan together that's a general plan, don't have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, or I want to look at this as a really special, innovative project and spend the time and the money and the energy and mind share to put together a really, really nice development for the community, and then let the community judge it through zoning and through.
And through the comp plan.
Yeah.
Which is not available today.
Which is not
Don't have
available
that.
today.
That
Right.
innovative technique is not available.
Right.
Dr. Marlene suggested having both of those tools in our toolbox,
Right.
right? That
Right.
sort of works.
Yeah.
And I totally agree.
There's been a slight refinement here, recognize the value of plan development type zoning to fulfill the policies of the comprehensive plan, identify and describe this district in stronger language, regulate, and this gets away from the vague, overall size, use, density, open space, dimensions and standards, encourage the inclusion of moderately priced housing in this district as stated in the policy, and the added language that picks up, I think, Andrew, what you were suggesting, run various scenarios, presumably from the comprehensive plan, to anticipate the lot yield and price of resulting homes.
But I should say from various.
Are there any other
Options
suggestions
that
for
was-
this recommendation?
The options are the 15% versus.
So this is
What?
6.2, so this goes back to what
The comp
Andrew's
plan
been
notes
saying
and comments
about
should
the different
include
strategies.
Some.
So the 15% allowing accessory housing, offering incentives,
Yeah,
allowing, for mixed-use developments, that kind of thing. Because
that's.
I agree with Andrew, it clearly states here
Yeah, I agree.
what to do.
Yeah, I mean, the people
Well,
before us, they kind
those are for
of,
instances, and so
they
that's
thought
why I
about all
think it's
this.
good to run the scenarios to see today, 7 years later,
So I
whether
think our
those
needs
things
are a little
would
different now.
result in what we need.
So our amenity needs are
Strategies.
different, or I think are transformed a little bit. Open space, people are more conscientious about open space, but not only that, but schools, right? So we're, I hear and understand, the concern, especially about Northwest School, Northwest High School and middle school, and how overpopulated that is, and is there a need for middle school in this area? And is that an amenity that we can trade? I hate to say the word trade, but, that could be something that we acquire from a developer in exchange for additional density in the local area. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I think gets really creative when you think about more, or I think about more as I talk to more people.
If Guilford County's interested in it.
Or charter school, it doesn't have to be, maybe it's a charter school, maybe it's a middle school, I think there's some willingness and ideas out there.
Sorry, go ahead.
And there is precedent.
Well, innovative plan development districts, like
Yeah.
what
that's what I was
Priscilla
gonna
is
say.
talking about, leave set-asides for institutional uses
Right.
like schools and churches and,
Retirement communities.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Any-
think we
any
should back
quick-
up as a recommendation there, and along the lines of what Priscilla and Andrew were both saying, is maybe recognize the value of adapting an OSRD IP to create a framework that supports the comp plan and these objectives, and then tie the objectives that are underneath specifically in there to make sure that it correlates.
Whose OSRD IP is that?
It's Brentwood, Tennessee, but I'm sure we have to review to make sure that they're,
It was just something I came across, I thought it was really interesting, when I was trying to search.
I think it's a good name.
Right.
What if we also recommended tying the density bonus based on the diversity of housing that they were going to put in?
In the application of that
Right.
scenario.
Right, so, you know, so it could go from, you know, our 15 to maybe 30, depending on the diversity, like if we just had a
That's a
formula
good
for
idea.
it.
You know, like that's interesting.
What'd you say, Amber? Did you hear that, Carrie?
Put it into something that can be a statement.
Like a, so if we, not us necessarily, but if someone came up with a formula for figuring out like the density bonus based on, for the OSRD, based on the diversity of housing they were going to put in. So it might fluctuate and only be a 15% density bonus versus maybe a higher one if they're going to put in more diverse housing.
It'd be like a permitted use table.
Maybe they could come up with some kind of like attribute table, like density would be one of the things, and it's kind of like a score sheet. And then you can go through that and say, and so we would have to come up with what those values, the criteria are, but one of them would be like density, and then you kind of use that sheet as far as, okay, they got this, so they get a check for that, and then the more checks they get, the more incentive they can get.
Some municipalities have incorporated those types of incentives for smaller homes, and it's usually density bonuses of some sort, in exchange for offering a mix of prices and a mix of sizes.
Wouldn't that score sheet be based on?
Okay, any further refinement to this
You could
recommendation?
do that.
Let's,
If Bill, I'd like to propose that we go for about 15 more minutes and
take a
take a little break,
okay, start.
and then keep going for next one, 5.
This one, we've already touched on this, but there are several people who suggested that this calls for an adoption of a preparation.
We've never heard that before. That's a new recommendation, isn't it?
And I've actually
But it should, and I like how you put it in green this time.
So Carrie, how
Yes.
does that work?
We went ahead and made it green and none of our comments.
You have to, so how does that work? How do you get to the adoption?
You start with the map that I have,
Yeah.
current zoning. You look at policies and you start coloring in areas that the town envisions being this
Who
type
colors
of.
in areas? Who makes
A
it?
consultant and public input.
And I think in previous discussion, extensive public input
Extensive
to
public
define.
participation, very important. And it'll be, again, it'll be led through the comp plan.
But the town council votes on it.
Yes, they would have
That's how
to,
it is.
well, it would have to be adopted, you know, and I haven't looked at this yet, but I'm assuming that the land use plan would have to go through the same procedures as the public hearing.
Typically would have the public hearing process through a zoning board and then recommending it on to the town council.
It'll become part of or appendix of the comp plan.
Are there, let's go to the next green, if we will. This one gets specifically to accessory, caretaker, add detached accessory housing back into the UDO as a permitted use in appropriate districts. Apparently it was missing. And establish appropriate standards to ensure compatibility. Allow as a permitted use by right where appropriate. Allow caretaker cottages as a permitted use. Those are a variety of different types of accessory. Any commentary on that? Anybody want to suggest any other changes to that? There's a lot in it, but it all focuses on accessory dwellings, detached.
What would be those appropriate districts?
You're asking for suggestions about what the appropriate districts would be?
Right.
Right now, our districts are defined by how big the lots are. So, you want, and we only allow detached accessory housing when the lot is 1.5 times the size of the district. So, do you want 2 houses on a 40,000 square foot lot?
No.
Do you want 2 houses on a 120,000 square foot lot? Do you want 2 houses only when it's part of a planned development? Or?
When you say 2 houses, are you talking about a primary house and?
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I mean about appropriate, like where it's appropriate within that particular zoning.
Okay, are we ready to move beyond this?
And just real quick, Priscilla, homeowners covenants will become prevalent if there is a zoning that allows accessory houses and a particular neighborhood does not. Those covenants would dictate. So there's still that.
The most common example that people think about is a garage apartment or something. But also, you try to think defensively, where else could it be and what limit could be placed on it? If there's not a garage, it's just an accessory dwelling of X square feet. Okay, are we ready to move beyond that? This one, there's one comment that said what? That the minimum lot size.
Remove this statement. There was, somebody was concerned that there's a lot of lot sizes that are already below that size, and then it would prohibit.
And the current draft has that language that it says, under no circumstance, under any circumstances, that minimum lot size can't be.
And that's really kind of, it's very counterintuitive to everything that we've been talking about.
Well, that was me, and it was only related to the
So the town core.
I figured that it's also.
And that's related to the next recommendation, where there's language that says that the administrator, Summerfield's administrator, and the Guilford County Department of Public Health may, but only with full agreement, reduce minimum lot size. The recommendation is to remove the capability for Guilford County Public Health, Department of Public Health, to reduce minimum lot sizes allowed by zoning.
I should add, and what I meant by zoning, they will reduce a lot size if the soils aren't there to accommodate. I mean, that's always going to be the case. I just don't think they can arbitrarily.
You're getting at, it should not be a unilateral decision on their part.
Yeah.
But the administrator should make that decision probably based on their information and soils and that sort of thing.
Soils lead to septic, right, is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So the septic should be granted for a specific number of bedrooms, not for a lot size.
Right.
I don't want, yeah, I just say they can,
Okay.
they're always gonna be following state.
We ready to move to the next? This one says, add development standards in the development standards part of the UDO for housing forms other than accessory dwelling unit.
I see, single family, there should be strong wording to address other housing.
Could we scroll to see if whoever made that comment?
That was me.